The Human Covenant War. It is the central conflict of the Halo franchise, a devastating interstellar war fought between humanity, led by United Nations Space Command, and a theocratic alien alliance known as the Covenant. The war begins in 2525, when the Covenant makes first contact with humanity and immediately declares a genocidal campaign, believing humans to be an affront to their religion. The Covenant worships the long-dead Forerunners and misinterprets humanity's genetic connection to them as heresy. And this war quickly escalates into an existential threat for humanity, who are technologically inferior and vastly outnumbered. Throughout the war, entire human colonies are destroyed via glassing, a brutal Covenant tactic that uses plasma bombardments from orbit to burn entire planets to ash. Billions of human lives are lost, and Earth itself eventually becomes a target. The war sees the rise of the Spartan II program, a controversial initiative to create super soldiers like Master Chief to turn the tide, and these Spartans become legendary defenders of humanity, especially in battles like Reach and the eventual defense of Earth. The tide begins to shift when a schism forms within the Covenant itself. Internal betrayal, religious contradictions, and the return of ancient threats like the Flood, the parasitic alien species, fracture the alliance. Meanwhile, humanity discovers more about the Halo Rings, massive superweapons built by the Forerunners, which the Covenant worships but misunderstands. And these rings are capable of wiping out all sentient life to stop the Flood, and the war evolves into a race to control or stop their activation. And the eventual destruction of the Covenant from within gives humanity a fighting chance to end the war. By 2552, after nearly 3 decades of relentless bloodshed, the Human Covenant War finally ends. The galaxy is left in ruins, its survivors scarred by genocide, betrayal, and the awakening of ancient powers. And the war's aftermath lays the groundwork for new threats and an easy peace. But it remains one of the bloodiest and most impactful wars in science fiction, where humanity came close to extinction. The Time War from Doctor Who. Also known as the Last Great Time War, this war is fought between the Time Lords of Gallifrey and the Daleks, and the war spans across all of time and space, making it a temporal apocalypse rather than a linear series of battles. Both sides possess godlike technology that allows them to rewrite history, erase timelines, and weaponize time itself. Events from the war ripple through the universe, and it's often said that the Time War broke the laws of reality, because battles were fought in the past, present, and future simultaneously. The war begins after numerous smaller fights between the Time Lords and the Daleks escalate into a full-scale conflict. As the Daleks evolve and multiply, becoming more unrelenting and destructive, the Time Lords respond with increasingly desperate measures, deploying forbidden technologies like the Could Have Been King, the Nightmare Child, and the war grows so dangerous that entire species are retroactively uncreated, time-locked, or turned into living weapons. Civilizations that never even participated are wiped from existence simply by being caught in the crossfire. At the heart of the war is the Doctor, who originally tried to stay out of the conflict but is eventually forced to intervene in its final days. In a desperate attempt to stop the Daleks and prevent the destruction of all of reality, the Doctor steals a sentient doomsday device known as the Moment. Believing he has no other choice, he uses it to destroy both the Daleks and the Time Lords, locking Gallifrey in a time lock and ending the war, at the cost of his own people. And this act, committed by a hidden incarnation, later called the War Doctor, haunts him for centuries and becomes a defining trauma in his life. And the true end of the Time War is later retconned. Gallifrey was saved and hidden in a pocket universe, and the war leaves the universe wounded and unstable, with time scars, paradoxes, and survivor species bearing the trauma. Crisis on Infinite Earths. It is one of the most monumental crossover events in comic book history. Published between 1985 and 1986, it was created to address decades of tangled continuity caused by DC's ever-growing multiverse, a vast system of parallel Earths, each with its own versions of familiar heroes. The war begins when a cosmic being, known as the Anti-Monitor, rises from the antimatter universe and declares war on all positive matter realities. His goal? Destroy every Earth in the multiverse and reshape existence in his image. As the Anti-Monitor unleashes massive waves of antimatter across the multiverse, countless worlds are annihilated. Entire universes blink out of existence. In response, his counterpart, the Monitor, gathers heroes and villains from multiple Earths, including Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 4, and more, to form a united front. Iconic characters such as Superman of both Earth 1 and Earth 2, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Supergirl, and dozens more fight across dimensions to hold the line. The scale is unprecedented. Battles erupt in the past, future, and alternate timelines. universe. Two of the most emotional moments in the war include the death of Supergirl, who sacrifices herself in battle against the Anti-Monitor, and Barry Allen, aka The Flash, giving his life to destroy the Anti-Monitor's antimatter cannon. And these weren't temporary deaths at the time. They lasted for decades and shook the foundation of the DC universe. As universes die, the heroes struggle to protect what's left of reality. And in a final battle, in the antimatter universe, the remaining heroes launch an assault on the Anti-Monitor himself. By the end of Crisis, the multiverse is collapsed into a single, unified timeline. Earths are merged, characters' histories rewritten, and only a few retain memories of the old worlds. This was both a reboot and a resurrection, clearing the slate while honoring the legacy of DC's Golden, Silver, and Bronze Ages. The War in Heaven. It is the oldest and most mythic conflict in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, a cataclysmic war that predates humanity, the Imperium, and even the Chaos Gods as we know them, taking place over 60 million years before the current timeline. It was fought between the Necrontyr, an ancient race afflicted by short, agonizing lives, and the powerful godlike Old Ones, masters of genetic engineering and the Webway. At first, a conventional war of hatred and envy, it escalated into a multidimensional apocalypse that forever scarred the galaxy, birthing the warp, the Chaos Gods, and the eternal cycle of war that defines the 40,000 universe. So the Necrontyr, driven by resentment of the Old One's immortality and power, waged a losing war, until they encountered the C'tan, starborn entities of pure energy. In a desperate pact, the Necrontyr surrendered their bodies and souls to become the Necrons, undying metal husks, built for war. Empowered by the C'tan, they launched a genocidal crusade across the stars, turning the war in their favor. The C'tan devoured stars, and the Necrons raised entire ecosystems, and in response, the Old Ones created new species, the Eldar, Krork, the early Orcs, and other psychic races, to fight back using the warp, a dimension of raw emotion and power. And this introduced a new and uncontrollable element into the universe, the warp's corruption. The psychic energy unleashed during the war sowed the seeds for the birth of the Chaos Gods, especially Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle. As the war spiraled into total destruction, the balance tipped again. The C'tan betrayed their Necron pawns, feeding on their suffering, and the Old Ones began to vanish, overwhelmed by their own creation. Realizing their mistake, the Necrons turned against the C'tan in a desperate rebellion, shattering them into fragments known as shard weapons, barely containing their cosmic power. With both sides decimated and reality itself damaged, the Necrons retreated into stasis tombs, going into a 60 million year slumber to await a galaxy they could conquer anew. The Elder rose in the power vacuum, unknowingly destined to repeat similar mistakes. And the War in Heaven didn't just end, it transformed the galaxy. The warp storms, the creation of chaos, and the fractured nature of the Necrons, and the psychic potential of many races all stem from this ancient, forgotten war. It is the original sin of Warhammer 40k, the first apocalypse, and the reason why the present is so unrelentingly grim. The Yuuzhan Vong War. It is one of the darkest and most devastating conflicts in the Star Wars expanded universe, spanning from 25 ABY to 29 ABY. It begins when an extragalactic species known as the Yuuzhan Vong invades the galaxy, bypassing known hyperspace lanes and attacking without warning. What makes them truly terrifying is their complete immunity to the Force, and their use of biotechnology instead of machines, organic weapons, living ships, and creatures that serve as armor, transportation, and even torture devices. And their arrival catches the New Republic off guard, and their hatred for mechanical technology and Force users leads to a brutal genocidal campaign. The Yuuzhan Vong are religious zealots who believe pain is holy and the galactic civilization is heretical. They destroy planets, terraform worlds, to suit their biology, and commit atrocities on a massive scale. And perhaps their most infamous act is the annihilation of Chewbacca, who dies saving Han Solo's son during the destruction of the planet Cernpedal, and later the fall of Coruscant, the heart of the galaxy, which is reshaped into a grotesque, organic hive city. The Jedi, once protectors of peace, become specific targets of extermination, forcing them into hiding or exile. And the Force itself seems to falter in the face of this unknowable enemy. As the war progresses, traditional alliances crumble and new ones form. The New Republic falters under internal division and is eventually replaced by the Galactic Alliance. Former enemies, such as the Imperial Remnant and the Hapan Consortium, join the fight, recognizing the Vong as a threat to all life. The Jedi, led by Luke Skywalker, Skywalker evolved their philosophy, moving from strict adherence to old doctrine to a more balanced adaptive role. And one of the most pivotal figures is Jacen Solo, whose experiences during the war reshape his destiny and plant the seeds for future galactic upheaval. And after the final battle at Coruscant, now renamed Yuuzhan, where a splinter group of peaceful Vong aids the Jedi in overthrowing their fanatical rulers. And the victory comes at a terrible cost. Billions dead, the Jedi Order shaken, and the galaxy forever changed. The Yuuzhan-Vong War stands apart in Star Wars history for its sheer brutality, existential terror, and more complexity. It challenged the very foundations of the Force, pushed characters beyond their limits, and marked one of the most mature and ambitious story arcs in the entire franchise. The Great Titan War from Attack on Titan. It is a foundational conflict that shapes the entire world of the series, long before the story begins. It was fought between the mighty Eldian Empire, who held the power of the Nine Titans, and the rival Marleyan nation, which sought to overthrow their oppressors. For over 1,000 years, the Eldian Empire used the power of the Titans to conquer and dominate other nations, committing mass atrocities and genocide in the process. And their supremacy was built on fear and bloodshed, with the royal family wielding the founding Titan to control or erase memories and manipulate history itself. However, internal strife within Eldia eventually weakened the empire. Rival noble families vied for control of the Titans, and as the Eldians turned on one another, the Marleyans seized the opportunity. They incited a revolution from within, culminating in a successful uprising that saw 7 of the 9 Titans fall under Marleyan control. And this marked the end of Eldia's golden age and the rise of Marley as the new global superpower. In the aftermath, the remaining Eldians, led by King Fritz, retreated to the island of Paradis, erecting the Tree Walls, Maria, Rose, and Sheena, and taking with them countless colossal titans as a final deterrent. From that moment on, the Eldians of Paradis lived in isolation, unaware of the truth, believing themselves to be the last remnants of humanity. Meanwhile, on the mainland, Marley weaponized the titans they'd stolen, training new titan shifters from among the oppressed Eldian population, using them as tools of war and propaganda. The Great Titan War's legacy is a world divided by history, lies, and hatred, with one side viewing the other as devils and the other trapped in ignorance. It lays the groundwork for the cycle of violence and vengeance that drives the entire series. The war's consequences extend far beyond the battlefield. It defines the ideological, racial, and political divisions that haunt every major character. And as Attack on Titan progresses, the ghosts of the Great Titan War loom over the new generation, shaping Eren Yeager's motivations, Marley's aggression, and the desperate attempts at peace or total annihilation. The Machine War. This war in the animated film 9, it is a haunting conflict between humanity and its own creation, a sentient super machine known as Brain. Designed by a well-meaning scientist to usher in a new age of prosperity, Brain is seized and repurposed by a totalitarian regime to manufacture an army of war machines. Stripped of morality and given orders to exterminate, Brain unleashes a devastating robotic uprising that leads to the total extinction of mankind. Unlike most fictional wars that center on battles and military strategy, the Machine War in 9 is told mostly through its aftermath, through ruins, silence, and the lingering presence of death. Cities lie in ruin, the sky is grey with ash, and the few glimpses we get of the war's climax show a scorched earth, where machines turned against their creators with cold, merciless efficiency. And the war ends not with a last stand or a noble sacrifice, but with complete annihilation. Humanity is gone, only echoes remain. And in a final act of desperation, the same scientist who created Brain uses alchemy to divide his soul into 9 tiny fragments, embedding each into small, doll-like constructs known simply by numbers, 1 through 9. And these sentient creations, fragile and curious, awaken after the war to find a desolate world with no memory of what came before. As they piece together their origin and face off against the last remnants of the machine army, they symbolically represent fragments of humanity: wisdom, courage, fear, fate, and creativity, trying to survive and make meaning in the void left behind. The Machine War in 9 is less about action and more about existential weight. It explores themes of unchecked technological progress, the misuse of science by authoritarian power, and the cost of playing God. The Infinity War. The Infinity War and Endgame saga is the climatic conflict of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga, spanning 2 films, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. At the center of the war is Thanos. Believing that the universe is overpopulated and on the brink of collapse, Thanos sets out to collect the 6 Infinity Stones, ancient artifacts of immense power, to wipe out half of all life in the universe with a single snap. His mission leads to a race against time, as Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, along with the Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, and others, attempt to stop him. In Infinity War, The conflict plays out across multiple battlefronts, from New York and Wakanda to the planet Titan. And despite the hero's efforts, Thanos proves unstoppable. He defeats the Avengers, kills key figures like Loki, Heimdall, Vision, and Gamora, and ultimately completes the Infinity Gauntlet. The film ends in shocking devastation as Thanos snaps his fingers, instantly erasing half of all life in the universe. And this event leaves the survivors shattered, hopeless, and directionless. And it is one of the darkest and most daring endings in film history. Endgame picks up 5 years later, exploring the deep emotional and psychological toll of that loss. The surviving Avengers hatch a desperate plan, travel through time using the Quantum Realm to retrieve the Infinity Stones from the past and undo Thanos' snap. And this sets up a heist-like middle act, revisiting iconic moments from previous films, before culminating in the Battle of Earth, the largest battle in MCU history. Thanos, having followed them from the past, wages a full-scale assault and nearly wins again, until Tony Stark sacrifices himself by wielding the Infinity Stones and snapping Thanos and his army out of existence, ending the war at the cost of his life. The Infinity War and Endgame arc is more than just a battle, it concludes a decade-long storyline with emotional weight, epic spectacle, and real consequences. Iron Man's final stand, Captain America's farewell, and the return of countless heroes all deliver a sense of closure rarely seen in franchise storytelling. And the war redefined what was possible in interconnected cinema, and remains a milestone in pop culture.